lot on their plate right now. Not only are they struggling to solve the Eurozone debt crisis, there are also growing concerns about democracy in those Central and Eastern European countries that joined the EU over the last decade. Bulgaria and Romania have been warned to stamp out corruption, while the rise of a far-right leader in Hungary has stoked fears about the independence of institutions. A reminder of tonight's guests. George Frederick Dewsbury is a historian and associate researcher at CERSEC, that's the Research Centre for Russia, Central Europe and the Caucasus. Iulia Badea-Gorite is a Romanian editor at the website presseurope.eu. In Bucharest, we're joined by Sorin Ionita. He's a political analyst at the Expert Forum. And in Brussels tonight, Carita Strachulat, a policy analyst at the European Policy Centre think tank. Well, before we go on, let's take a look at this. This is a map of the European Union and each country's GDP. Have a look at that. Now, the lighter the colour, the smaller the economy. And the lighter yellow, which you can see is all in the East European countries, shows that their GDP is less than half the European average. I'll go back to you in Bucharest, Sorin Ionita. Now, this is a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? Because we've got all this political bickering going on. That's the last thing investors want to get involved with. While that happens, the economy is kept in constant gridlock. Nobody's getting any wealthier, and the democracy isn't getting any healthier.
It is true to some extent, although over the last decade there has been some catch-up. So indeed, the GDP is half of the EU average, but it used to be 1/4 actually when we started the negotiations with the EU. In spite of the crisis, there has been some catch-up. There is a problem with this fight over the rule of law. So basically what we see now is a good sign. It's a sign that things are moving, and because people are annoyed, it means something is happening on the judiciary front. Before that, we used to have a cozy agreement against politicians to share the spoils. It used to be a corrupt society, but without any conflict, actually, because when you share the spoils, according to an agreement in a mafia society, that doesn't need to be an open conflict. Now there is uncertainty precisely because at least some parts of the judiciary have become independent. And other bodies, other institutions like the Competition Council, like the Ombudsman, with the help of the EU, with support from the acquis communautaire, they have become more independent, which means there's more unpredictability at the top of the governance. You cannot trust the others to keep the omerta, as it used to be the case. You have prosecutorial investigations, and the atmosphere is much more bitter now than it used to be. We are not beyond, the tipping point. We can still go back to the old situation, but compared to what we had 5 or 6 years ago, it is much better now, and we have instruments that function for the first time. In 150 years since modern Romania was created, in mid-19th century, we have never had a minister arrested and convicted for corruption until 3 years ago. So you can understand the shock, the electric shock, when a former prime minister was put in jail last month. No? For the whole political class, including the party of the suspended president. This is why I'm saying there is a huge silent majority in favor of the old status quo. But that is not possible anymore in Europe, of course.
We go back to that old point about trust then, don't we? Politicians are worrying about going to jail. They're going to be clinging onto power with all their might, aren't they?
There's that, but must be remembered that there was a magic moment in December of '89 when Ceausescu was magically removed, essentially by Iliescu. And since then, no major participant in the Securitate has gone to jail. The crimes of the Securitate have never been investigated. I would like to believe in the rule of law, but I think there's a huge protection for the political classes that go there. So trust, of course there's fear. Nastase going to jail after his ill-conceived attempt at killing himself, well, we'll get into that later, was a shock, was a real shock. And it's true that there are many members of the parliament who are next. But you cannot run a government on this basis. There has to be, at the end of the day, a social contract in which we believe the governments are created by the people to serve their interest. And I think in all the countries we've mentioned, that has not been done. There is something of a game of elites, elite clans, if you will, who are claiming power. And until we get this real feedback, I've heard in the last 3 weeks, oh, the people want this, the people want that. I really wonder what the people want. Despite the call for a boycott, we had much less than 50% who showed up. What do people want? I don't think the politicians really care.
Well, what made President Băsescu so unpopular in the first place was this drive for austerity, which of course isn't specific to Romania. We're seeing that in countries all across Europe. And Romania does have to pay back a pretty hefty 24 billion euro loan. That's playing a big part, isn't it?
Yes, I think so, because Romania lives now under, how we say in French, perfusion, with the money loaned by FME and EUA and European Central Bank, and the TV channels, the most popular TV channels, who are very close to an idea of populism, of nationalism in Romania, who are very close to the idea that more Europe, it's not good. We need to behave, to try a behavior, to behave like ourselves in our country. They succeed to convince the people that the cuts in the budget of functionaries, that the doctors who leave the country, the austerity project and all, the TVA who was measured to 19 to 24. These all measures are the fault of Băsescu, and they convince the people that Băsescu is the guilty one, and that revenge it's needed. But the Romanians who have decided not to go to the vote, to the referendum, has delivered two messages, in fact. One, that they have enough, both for the right and the left, and even we had heard calls from we want back the monarchy, and in the other side, the fact that they vote by Băsescu, Traian Băsescu dismissal in 87%. They leave him very weakened. So the struggle, the war is not over. We expect everything now in Romania, really.
Let's go back to how the EU can respond to these kind of concerns. Karina Strachelad, it seems that the EU has two methods at its disposal. Either it can threaten sanctions under what's called Chapter 7 of the Lisbon, Article 7, of the Lisbon Treaty, or of course it can dangle bailouts, which at the moment are very crucial to everybody.
Yes, can you repeat that? I heard you with interruption.
Two methods available to the EU to deal with countries not playing by the rules: Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, etc.
Yeah.
Dangle a bailout, or possibly Article 7 of the Lisbon Treaty, sanctions.
Yeah, we've seen against Hungary, in fact, that the EU has made resort to Article 258 of the treaty, activating infringement procedures. But of course, as you say, it also has Article 7 available, which, however, is more complicated to activate, and it's really a difficult instrument to make use of. However, I think that the discussion also has to be seen in the context of the ongoing, first and foremost, in the context of the ongoing economic crisis, which has caused a lot of social problems, and at the same time it underscored the increasing distrust among European citizens towards politicians and political parties' abilities to deal with the complexities of our modern life in a globalized world. And this has opened space for new forms of opposition from the fringe of the political systems, but also increasingly from the mainstream, an opposition that is characterized by a powerful populist rhetoric, xenophobia, and of course which also causes huge distrust between and among member states.
Some say the EU itself is being undemocratic in calling for these changes in exchange for bailouts or with the threat of sanctions. Do you think this is in some way harmful to these countries' development?
Well, I think the European Commission is right to reiterate its the principles, the democratic principles, values and rules on which it is based, and to reiterate those in cases where they seem to have been forgotten or put to the side. So the European Commission, as the guardian of the treaties, has this right to restate those principles and to try to protect them, because this is this represent the building blocks of the European Union. So it is only normal that it would do so. Moreover, the member states, when they're signed to join the European Union, when they have subscribed to respect what is in the treaties. So they need to be reminded, and they need to know that they don't only have rights but also obligations, including in regard to the respect of the rule of law and to all the democratic rights and principles that the EU is based on.
What do you think, George Frederick Dewsbury, about the EU's methods in dealing with these wayward countries, these rebels in class, if you like?
Well, the EU really has very little power when you come down to it. They were very angry with Austria. You may remember a couple of years ago when there was a fascist party running around, and they growled at Orban. Orban adjusted, and they growled at Ponta, and Ponta, well, was not skilled in his response to the EU. But our colleague in Brussels makes a good point. It is a modernizing world. It is a world in economic crisis. And it must be said that Romania, unlike Greece, fulfilled its responsibilities. It is not a part of the world which is in great economic crisis, because Băsescu very unfeelingly imposed these restrictions, and he's paying for it. But the result in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, is almost the same, is nationalism. It's closing the borders. We remember in the French presidential campaign, we saw the National Front calling for this. Last night, Crin Antonescu, when he was responding to the vote, began to condemn the Hungarians the Hungarians in Romania, because they didn't vote the right way. And then we have Orban, who is pushing the whole idea that the Treaty of Trianon, for God's sake, that ended the First World War, that they should have Transylvania back. I mean, this is the only place in the world where you will see graffiti protesting something that happened in 1919. So in economic crisis, people become nationalistic. They want to shut the doors, and they want to lash out against the other.
This is a very worrying trend, isn't it, Sorin Ionita, this rise of the far right in Hungary, in Romania and elsewhere?
I don't see a far right in Romania right now, fortunately. I mean, this is one of the unfortunate differences that we have from Hungary, that, as I tried to explain, this is a very rational fight about the rule of law and not going to jail, actually. In what way it will play politically with a frustrated public which have taken the hardships of the austerity package in their stride. We have to see in the November election. We have parliamentary elections in November. But so far the trend in Romania was a very Balkan one. So you have during the campaign an anti-system party with a lot of flashy characters promising populist things, but after elections somehow they are bought into the mainstream somehow, which is not very terribly democratic, I admit, but at least you don't see these parades with uniforms and that you see in more Central European countries. We don't have that. There is quite
a lot of, some might say there is quite a lot of persecution of the Roma community within Romania.
It is. This is absolutely true, but this is a historical reality and is very deeply entrenched in society. Fortunately, even for that, we don't see a party movement organized, fortunately. But I have to admit that Romanian politicians, even from mainstream parties, are deeply conservative in terms of these kind of values. And you can hear even from the most surprising, you hear such kind of jingoistic language, xenophobic even, from the leaders of the National Liberal Party, which are members of the European liberal family, actually, which is totally surprising. They were, what the episode you refer to with Mr. Antonescu blaming Hungarians for the low turnout is not even the most important one. The language was much tougher 3 months ago, when the previous government tried to implement, education programs in a certain university in Romania in Hungarian language, and the opposition at that time, the liberal opposition, was a flagship of nationalist language. But apparently it was purely instrumental. However, it can play at some point very bad with the public. I mean, you can start a reality which doesn't exist right now, but this is still a virtual possibility in Romania, while, you have these parties with electoral support in other countries around us. So it is a warning, not yet a reality here, but we have to see how it plays out for the November elections.
Right, Yulia, quite. We've got parliamentary elections coming up in November. It'll be interesting to see what the next chapter in Romanian politics will bring us.
I am afraid that the next election, parliamentary election, will bring us a very huge percent of populist parties. I'm afraid of this. But
you disagree with Sorin, then? You think there is a far-right movement within Romania?
I disagree. I think that we can talk about populism, about nationalism, neo-nationalism, but we are far away from the extreme right of other times, like Corneliu Vadim Tudor. We don't have this anymore. I don't agree. We don't have an extremist movement. But nationalism, neo-nationalism and populism, yes. And I'm afraid of this because, look, we have a TV moderator, Dan Diaconescu, who is the leader of a party, and the people wants to vote him at 61%. It's enormous. And if the people like him gonna run Romania, I think we are not in the way of democracy. And for you, it's very, very difficult to do something to make a right and good intervention in Romania.
All right, we're just 30 seconds left, George. Do you think there's hope for Romania? It can be top of the class instead of bottom of the class over the next few years?
Oh, I think B+ in the next 2 generations. Yeah, I think so. They've made really extraordinary progress in 20 years, but there's so much left to be done.
All right, George Frederick Dewsbury, Iulia Badea Garite, in Bucharest, Sorin Ionita, and in Brussels, Corina Stratilat. Thank you very much indeed to all of you for taking part in tonight's debate. Thank you to you, as always, for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more discussions. This is France 24. Stay with us.